Welcome to another episode of the Equus Trial Lawyers podcast. We seek to educate and empower our listeners in areas of trial law that affect our daily lives. If you have a question about how a topic affects you, please follow the link on social media or call our office at 330-231-1195 for a consultation, and we'd be happy to try to answer your questions. My name is Tom White. I'm the Equus Law Group Senior Partner, and Kate?
Hi, I'm Kate Kimball. I'm Equus Law Group's Litigation Managing Partner.
Now, we are trial lawyers, and we are unabashedly proud of being trial lawyers, as you folks will probably find out in listening to us. Trial lawyers are important parts of jokes and also part of our culture, part of movies, and just like to start with these words. I am a trial lawyer. My clients call me in a crisis with the worst white nightmares of their lives, and they trust me to guide them through the darkness with wisdom and skill. Trial lawyers do not become great overnight. It takes persistence, a relentless work ethic, a willingness to learn from mistakes, a burning passion for my craft, and a sense of authentic self, and the courage and vulnerability to enter the arena time and again. Those who become great trial lawyers have the opportunity to become great people. Through my work, I grapple with the gritty realities of human experience and process. I develop character, integrity, leadership, strength, and compassion. And I have the privilege to pass what I have learned on to those who follow me. That's kind of a statement of who we believe that we are as trial lawyers, and I'd like to give a tip of the hat to the RVA podcast by Richmond, Virginia trial lawyers. Kate, why don't you introduce our second episode here?
Sure. Thanks, Tom. So welcome to episode 2 of our series about oil and gas issues in Ohio. Many of our clients in southeastern Ohio and beyond have been part of the almost 15-year now development in oil and gas production through deep horizontal drilling. And this has led our clients in some instances to great wealth and in others great heartache. So through this, our trial experience has grown in knowledge and experience. And we have started this podcast to talk about all sorts of issues related to that. There's only a small group of oil and gas attorneys in Ohio, and so we regularly run into the same people. And so we're going to talk about a variety of issues related to oil and gas law in Ohio.
And before we get into those specific episodes, we thought we would introduce ourselves and tell you a little bit about our background and our experience. In episode 1, Kate interviewed me, and in this episode, I get to interview Kate. Kate, for those who missed episode 1, why don't you tell us a little bit about your name?
Sure. So my full name, which can confuse people sometimes when they get mail from Catherine, which is actually my name. My full name is Catherine Knight Kimball. My maiden name is Knight. I am married to a Kimball from Hopedale, Ohio. So it causes some confusion within our office and other places because there is a Kimball family that we talked a little bit about in our first episode that is involved in oil and gas and coal and waste management. And so I regularly am asked if I'm related to them since we are often opposed from them. And luckily, the answer for clients anyway is no, that I am not related to those Kimballs.
Okay.
So,
and Knight is spelled Knight, and that is that's the logo for our firm, Equus Law Group. So
it is.
Is that
fortuitous?
Did that come from you, or?
I wish. I came into that. So I tell Chris that we can never change it now. So, and I should use Knight for things because it just fits so well.
Okay, so I understand, Kate, that you are a Harrison County native, right?
I am.
And growing up in Harrison County, tell me a little bit about growing up in southeastern Ohio.
Sure. So southeastern Ohio, and I'm specifically Harrison County, right? I lived in Harrison County my entire childhood. My parents have a farm. They'd had it for my entire life. They still have it. And that's where I grew up. So I think that I had a pretty typical Harrison County childhood, right? Like growing up on a farm. It's actually kind of funny that I thought probably until like later elementary school that everybody's dad farmed, and that's what everybody did all summer, was ride around in the tractor with their dad. I don't know at what point or what age I realized that that was not actually what all of my friends did all summer, was mow hay with their dad in the tractor. So that's kind of funny. And I've several siblings, and so that was pretty much my childhood in Harrison County, was being around those kinds of things all the time. And so I graduated from Harrison Central High School. After even high school, I still stayed in Southeastern Ohio. I went to Marietta College for my undergraduate degree and for a master's degree. And so even then I was still in this quarter of the state. And it wasn't until after my master's degree that I lived in the Great Plains for a while, which we may talk some about too. And so Southeastern Ohio is a special place for me, really. It's not quite like anywhere else I've lived. It's really, I mean, we talk about it being like Appalachian, and it really is. I was talking to someone recently about counties' populations in Ohio, and the counties that I am most often in our offices are Harrison and Monroe County. And they're both in the bottom 5 least populated counties in the state. And so, some of the other bottom 5 are surrounding counties to them too. So it's really just a kind of different kind of place in the state. I sometimes tell people that I just like to have some space. So I want to spread out some. So that's why I live there.
Okay. So before we leave your upbringing in Harrison County, who or what is the Jim Hinker?
Oh, the Jim Hinker. I try to mention the Jim Hinker as much as I can, just because I think it's really interesting. So from what I'm aware, the Jim Hinker is pretty, I mean, it has a particular home. It's some kind of like elusive creature that lives in Nottingham Township in Harrison County. I don't know if it goes in other townships. He really just lives in Nottingham Township, and will eat sheep and lambs and calves and things, I guess. So if something happens to someone's lamb, sometimes people say it was the Jim Hinker. In the office, we've talked about him with like Mothman and things like that. He's come up pretty often. It's also the name of my fantasy football team in the office. So is the Jim Hinker.
Okay. I just wanted to I hear you talk about it from time to time, but
Yeah.
I've never met the gentleman.
Yeah, I don't think you want to, Tom.
Probably not. Although I'm from the Mohican area now, and we have, the Sasquatch sightings over there. Mm-hmm. Although I'm not aware that he preys on livestock a lot, but we'll find that out. So you graduated from high school and you went to college where?
Marietta College in
Marietta. And studied what?
At Marietta, I studied psychology, and I also they have a master's program in psychology. So I also got a master's degree there in psychology from Marietta.
Why psychology?
That's really interesting. So when I started undergrad, and for a while, maybe like a semester, I thought I wanted to be an orthodontist actually, which I don't know why. But I did not love my biology classes. And so I had taken like an intro psych class, I think my first semester at Marietta, and I loved it. And really, I mean, that's been several years ago now. Everything about psychology is so interesting to me because it's really just about human behavior and why do people do the things they do, make decisions how they make them. And so it's really applicable to law. And so once I started psychology classes, I just loved them. And so I stuck with it at that point.
Then you get your bachelor's and your master's at Marietta. What happens next?
Sure. So my advisor at Marietta was a social psychologist. And so social psychologists study basically human behavior. It's not like a clinical psychology, like treatment kind of subfield. And so he was a social psychologist, and talking with him about like my master's thesis there, I wanted to do a jury decision making study. And he was like, I think there are programs out there that are like law psychology programs, like super subfield of like social psychology. So I started looking into them, and I found one. It's actually the oldest one in the country, I think, is at the University of Nebraska. And so I ended up going and moving and living in Nebraska for about 6 years to go through the law psychology program there. Through that program, you get a PhD in psychology of different types. And so mine's social psychology and a law degree at the same time. And so I was trying to be efficient, I guess. And so you just do two things at once. And so I moved to Nebraska for that program for a while.
Okay, if Tyler is showing me on camera right now, my face is, I mean, it's hard enough to go through law school, but law school and a PhD program in psychology, I just cannot imagine. But first, before we get into what you studied and how they related to each other, what was it like moving from southeastern Ohio to Nebraska?
I loved Nebraska, actually. And so it's different, but it's the same in so many ways. So the geography is obviously different. People talk about the plains being really flat. It is. It's more rolling than I think I would have expected it to be, but it's not like here. It's not like Eastern Ohio at all. We would actually be there for a few months and like come back for holidays and things. And I would realize when we came back how few trees there are there and how many there are here. So that's kind of, it's just something you don't really think about until you're in it. So that was different, but the people were so similar. It's like there's a lot of like pioneer things in Nebraska, right? Like there's the Homestead Monument is like an hour away from Lincoln. So things like that are just kind of the culture there. But they are here too. So Marietta's mascot is the Pioneers, which is the first permanent settlement in the Northwest Territory, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of just like more of that, like culture was similar. The weather is different though. So that took some adjusting.
How's the weather different?
Nebraska is more extreme than Ohio in almost every way. So here we talk about how many like 90-degree days there are in the summer. There it's regular to have 100-degree days. In the winter, I mean, wind chills, -40. That happens every winter. Like don't go outside or you'll get frostbite, things like that. So that took some adjusting too. Just the extremes in weather were different.
What were the people like in Nebraska with you being from Ohio?
So it's in the program I was in, the psychology program would pull students from the whole country. So my closest friends in that program were from like around San Francisco and California. So we were from very different types of places, or like Gainesville, Florida, Indianapolis. Like those are like my closest friends were from like cities in these other places. But there were actually a lot of PhD students from Ohio. So, but even to them, they were from Cleveland and Cincinnati and Columbus, and they're like, where's Caddis, right? So that was a little bit different. The law school is almost all Nebraskans in Nebraska. And so most people I know from Nebraska are from the law school. And so they were more alike, I guess, from where I am in Ohio than even some of my like PhD friends were. So it's kind of odd.
You have a story about trying to find a parking space at a football game.
I do. I don't know if it was 2011 or 2012, but it was the first time Nebraska and Ohio State were playing each other in like 56 years or something, because Nebraska had just joined the Big Ten. And so we were going to the Nebraska-Ohio State football game in Lincoln and driving around in my like Ford Focus with Ohio license plates on it. And people kept stopping us to try to help us find somewhere to park. So all these Nebraskans who were thinking we had driven from Ohio for the game, even though we lived in Lincoln for a couple years, were trying to help us, like direct us to the best parking lots and things. And people were just they're just nice there. Like always trying to be helpful. Like even at the Ohio State-Nebraska football game, which I think Nebraska killed Ohio State in that game in the last few seconds.
I'm not sure that they did, but we'll let that pass for right now. I just, I went to school in Columbus, and I cannot imagine somebody with license plates from a certain state up north getting a warm reception by those folks in Columbus, but we'll let that go. So what did you find interesting about the interrelationship in your studies between law and psychology?
Sure. A lot of like law psychologists, there's a whole conference that's like the American Psychology Law Society that are mostly psychologists who study legal issues. They study all sorts of them. So one of the most common like general areas of study is jury decision making, which we know is not like the single issue we run into most often, because you don't get juries very often, right? When you get them, they're really important, and those studies are very useful, but it's not like every day we're dealing with juries. That's a big area of study, though. It's like, how do these groups of people, how are they presented information? How do they perceive and interpret information? How do they discuss it? How does deliberation work? So there are all sorts of studies related to jury decision making, but there are also studies on interpretations of law, how judges make decisions, how people perceive different like legal constructs, like discrimination, like what actually do people think is discrimination or harassment. So they're interrelated in all sorts of ways, because at the end of the day, legal decisions are just human decisions based on something we've all agreed is the law. So it's really studying that human behavior part of the legal world, really.
Well, let's hold that in thought, and then take you after you finish college. You and your husband moved back to Harrison County, right?
We did.
Have a family.
Yes. Our oldest daughter was actually born in Nebraska, and she is very proud of being a Cornhusker. So she will have that forever.
I have met your oldest daughter. She is a unique personality.
Strong. Yes.
Very strong. Very
yes.
strong. So, and then what did you do professionally after law school? You, of course, took the bar exam here in Ohio and passed the bar. What'd you do? And then how did you join us? Sure.
So even before we moved back to Ohio, I started working for the National Center for State Courts I was basically a contracted researcher. So I would do like statistics and things for a subgroup of that company that really studied problem-solving courts. So basically, like a mental health court or a drug court, that part of their mission is treatment, is how effective are they? Like, is what they're doing actually like decreasing recidivism or something like that? So I was working with them on courts all over the country, basically program evaluation. Are they working or not? And so I was working from home doing that and sitting like outside Caddis, working for these courts all over the place, which I really love doing. But it felt kind of like disconnected. Like I'd moved back, but I wasn't like always here. So it was kind of different. And that's actually when I found White Law Office, was when I was thinking about what else I might want to do. And there was a job posting that I think was listed as Cambridge even. And I was like, well, I'll just apply for it anyway. And that's how I met Chris.
Okay. And you eventually joined us. You're now the a partner, and you're the trial litigation head. I have to ask you this. Of course, you are now a trial lawyer, but you also do transactional work, trying to negotiate agreements on behalf of our clients. You've actually, I think we've tried a couple of cases to a jury. Mm-hmm. In your experience. How does theory and research compare to what you actually see in a courtroom with a jury?
Research is a lot more like slow paced, right? Like when you're with the jury at trial, like it's all so much faster. So it's really about preparation at that point, right? Knowing what studies and what variables might happen, how that might apply in real life, is so much faster in real life, obviously, than in research would be. And so, so much of it is really specific to your particular area and the facts, and that not even that particular jury as much as where we are. So when we run into juries, especially in something like a property rights case, things that are kind of just make sense that you'd want in a juror, like that just makes sense. And so the research would support a lot of things like that. So I think it's applicable, but it's all about preparation, I think.
So you join our group. You're based in Cadiz, but you also manage the Woodsfield office, right?
Right.
Okay. And so, of course, you're immediately immersed into Ohio oil and gas law. What was that like?
I loved it. So, and I still love it. I like talking about growing up in Harrison County, things like coal. I've always been around. Like Harrison County used to have a coal festival, and it was like the biggest thing. So I can remember going to that when I was younger. And so things like property issues and having so many relatives that are farmers and own land and things. I've always been around that. So like getting to actually do it is like, I love it.
What was the most challenging thing about becoming involved in Ohio oil and gas?
That's a really good question.
Thank you. That's why I asked.
I appreciate it. So,
you can tell I was a judge, right?
Yes, for sure.
Go ahead.
I feel it, probably that it's so detailed, this is something I enjoy, but is challenging. It's so detailed and nuanced, that you never think how much trouble this 100-year-old deed, interpreting that today, what does that mean, and all the details that go into it. So it's probably the most challenging thing, I would say. But I think that's one of the reasons I enjoy it so much, is that it is so nuanced and complicated.
Okay. And we'll be doing episodes dealing with the various issues that oil and gas lawyers face. But I'd like to kind of break down your experience a little bit as first as a trial lawyer in front of a trial judge. What stands out to you about practicing, let's say, in front of Judge Harvey in Harrison County, or Judge Selman in Monroe County, or one of the Belmont County judges? The judges that we are, and it's expanding as what the oil and gas industry calls the play geographically expands. What's most important for an oil and gas lawyer who's a landowner advocate in the trial court?
Most important?
Yeah. Or you can cover a couple things that are important.
As nuanced as I can be.
Yeah.
Probably that, I mean, if I was preparing to go into one of those places with any of those particular judges, I would be thinking about what I know about how they approach the issues, because the issues can be so complicated and complex, and probably kind of dry. Like, how many do they want to see of the same kind of case? So I would say that's one kind of aspect of it, is to be a landowner advocate, how can you get your client in the best position as possible to get your point across to that particular judge as clearly as you can. So I would say that that's one of the most important things. But at the same time, being thorough, because these things sometimes turn on really little details, and something that might be one deed in a whole chain. So being as simple as possible and straightforward as possible is probably always I always try to do that. Why make something complicated if it doesn't have to be, right? So I would say those are probably the most important things.
Previously, you said we often, in our oil and gas litigation cases, don't get a chance to talk to a jury. Why is that?
Most often, I would say, and this is obviously not always true, which is also the attorney answer, that it depends on the particular case and the particular facts. But it depends on the issues, but some oil and gas cases really come down to, I think about it like things that you can't change, like 100-year-old deeds. They are what they are. That's often a decision and interpretation for a judge and not a jury. And so some of those cases kind of end at that point and never even get to a jury, because there's really nothing for them to decide there. If it's really just legal questions about old documents or something. Sometimes they end at an earlier point, which can be beneficial to a client because it's not as long of a process.
Right.
Sometimes.
And then if we happen to win, there's generally a discussion with the oil and gas producer or the other side with competing claims of a settlement. But oftentimes that initial decision, which generally comes down to who owns what, right?
Right.
Okay. You have to do some appellate work in the Court of Appeals and maybe even higher. What's been your experience and what do you like about that?
Sure. So when there's a decision in the trial court, there's always the possibility of an appeal. And so in Ohio, a lot of those oil and gas appeals have been, as we've seen anyway, in the 7th district, just because of the counties that are in that district. I expect that to change, though. I think we'll see more and more as like the play moves west. We'll see more like 5th district cases, even though we see some already. So I think that's kind of the process. An appeal could easily happen, and that process really just involves usually briefing that court and arguing to that court why what happened before should be the same or should be changed somehow. And I really enjoy doing those. They usually are just writing briefs and doing like an oral argument just to a panel of judges, which I really enjoy doing. At that point, that court will make a decision on whatever the issue in front of them is. Sometimes it can also be appealed to the Ohio Supreme Court, which we've also been fortunate to have cases accepted in the Ohio Supreme Court because they don't have to take them all. So there's never a guarantee they'll hear you. But we've been fortunate that they have. And so I've been fortunate enough to be able to go there because you let me go, Tom.
And win.
So yes. And it's even a better experience when you win. So it's fun to go. It was, there's nothing quite like it to go there.
All right. So you mentioned some of our viewers might not be familiar with District Court of Appeals. I think you mentioned the 7th District, which is based in Youngstown, and that district kind of goes down along the Ohio River counties,
right,
down toward Marietta. And then you mentioned the 5th District, which is it's based in Canton, goes down to Guernsey County, and then over toward Columbus, and then of course Marietta and over to Athens is 4th District. So that's how lawyers refer to the courts of appeals that hear cases by district. So bottom line, are you happy with how your career has gone in oil and gas?
Well, yeah, I love it. Okay. I'm trying to, I think oil and gas is interesting, and I think it's exciting. And I think sometimes people, especially who they haven't been in it, are kind of like, oh, that sounds like kind of dry, like not, but I really enjoy it. So, and I think you do too, which makes it even easier because we can talk about it then.
Well, yes, we both like puzzles.
Right.
And putting the puzzle together and trying to figure it out and then say, okay, what's the law say about this? And then see the law develop, and actually having the privilege of being an attorney who has the ability to say, hey, that's how I advance the law here. Win or lose, you're starting to define Ohio oil and gas law, and that is very interesting. But the real payoff is helping people as landowners who are really, when you compare them to the multi-billion-dollar oil and gas producers, at a disadvantage. And it is nice to be able to help regular folks.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a privilege.
All right. Well, folks, thank you for joining us for this episode. We invite you to join us in the future for more exploration of challenges landowners face in Ohio oil and gas law. Thank you.